Great stuff. You're very welcome. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the last in our series of webinars about the future of post-production. Tomorrow is our in-person event in the Gorey School of Arts, which is going to be fantastic. That will, excuse me, that will also be online as well. This evening, though, very exciting, we have Ben Foakes, and we're going to be talking about the post house of the future. It's going to get pretty geeky and techy at times. So there is a Q&A button down the bottom. Feel free to ask a question at any time, especially if we start talking about something, and I'm going to get left behind, I'm sure, at some points. If you don't understand anything, if you want us to clarify anything, if you want us to go further down a certain rabbit hole, just let us know. So as an intro to Ben, he's the founder and CEO of Base, a leader in cloud-native media services for borderless workflows. He brings over 20 years of experience in the media industry, with roles ranging from editor on Formula One, working on some of the Bond films. He previously ran a post facility before founding Base in 2014 to revolutionize media technology services. He is passionate about creating innovative solutions, mentoring teams, and building forward-thinking companies. Now, the aim of this webinar is to explore the technologies that are shaping post-production and its decentralization. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Joe. Nice to see you again after all these years.
Yeah, oh, it's great to see you, man. I think we first crossed paths in the mid-late noughties in Hammersmith, and we'd taken two companies from Soho and moved them all on from Avid onto Final Cut 7 and a network system there. And I believe around that time you set up Sequence Post, I think.
Yeah, that's right. My first bigger company. I think it was my second business, but my first proper business with staff. I was like 22 years old and started a post house originally from home. Then it quickly scaled into a facility at Pyman Studios. And then we launched in London. And over the years, we kind of deployed editors on lots of live sports shows and things. And that's where we met. So yeah, back in the day, we were persuading people to move off of clunky old school Avid onto Apple Final Cut Pro systems. And wind forward 20 years, now we're doing the same in the cloud. So yeah, it's lovely to see you again.
Yeah, I mean, that was an exciting time because that was, I suppose, maybe the start of, I mean, it was quite a few steps away from the cloud, but it was certainly that breaking free of almost the monopoly of the gear. You know, Final Cut 7 was an affordable thing. We could do it. We networked it. We proved it could work as a post house. It was an exciting time.
It's so true. I literally remember buying my first G4, and it must have been, I don't know, £1,000 or something at the time. But with a few days of freelance money, I was able to build my first edit suite. And it was the point where it became available to everyone. So it used to be kind of quite elitist. You had to have millions of investment, build out a big post house in a central city, bind your customers to really high rates. And at that time, we were able to then make it much lower cost and more accessible. And also the talent was more readily available. Younger people were able to get access to the tools. And I honestly think that same approach or that same mentality has flowed into what I do now. I really like it when we can give access to really cutting edge technology for a low price for more people.
So yeah, it's fantastic. And I have to thank you. So I think I did some of my first freelance editing jobs at Sequence as well. So
Excellent.
yeah, that was a great time. So maybe talk us through Sequence to kind of now, and maybe then expand on what Base is.
Yeah, sure. So I started out my career very young, actually. When I was a teenager, I was a professional BMX freestyle rider. So me and my brother Sam used to tour, do magazine shoots, and I used to make videos. So when I was like 16, 17, 18, I was filming BMX videos with VHS cameras with fisheye lenses, gaffer tape to the front, digitizing that and then editing it. And as it matured into the digital domain, into mini DV at the time, and then DVD distribution, that became a real side hustle and a passion project on top of riding my BMX. And I learned editing through extreme sport. Then went to university in Bournemouth and specialized in post-production, and then became a technology tutor and kind of technology geek, I suppose. And when I was about 20, I got my first Avid edit job, which was in broadcast television. And that was the moment where I realized I really wanted to just to go all in with post-production tech. I loved it. I loved getting my hands dirty. I loved the creativity mixed with the tech side. I really like blending those sides of the brain. At 22, as we just mentioned, I launched my first post house. That was called Sequence. And it never grew massive, but what was really cool about it was the projects we worked on. So um, we were the lead edit house for Formula One for ITV for about 5 years. We did a
Okay.
few RTS winning pieces for that, and we were involved in the 2 years where it got a BAFTA. So we were like super proud of our contribution to that series. But we also did mainstream drama like Hollyoaks for Channel 4. We did the end titles for two Bond movies, Quantum of Solace and Skyfall. All sorts of promos, music videos, stuff for Girls Aloud, Rolling Stones. It was just an epic period of time. So it was a passion project with really creative people using the latest in tech, but I lost it all when I was about 30. The short version of the story is great creative business, zero financial management, very high costs, very expensive buildings in a major city. And as as you'll all know from post-production, it's a project-based business model. So if you're reliant on spiky revenue streams, but you've got fixed costs, that is not a good place to be. And I got into the position when I was about 30 years old where I was the sole owner. I had a few tiny investors, but I was the main owner with all of the costs on my shoulders, and I went bust. But it was honestly the best thing that could ever happen to me at that age because I learned everything I needed to about how to rebuild myself and my business and also rethink the way post-production could be done. And the key takeaways were I never wanted to have physical premises again, like run a big rented building. I'm stood in a membership building. I pay a really low amount per month to have my staff come and go. I never want to have a big lease again in my life. I never wanted to have hardware again and the headache of buying it, maintaining it, renewing it, etc. And I never wanted spiky project revenue again. I wanted annual recurring revenue because that way you can make more intelligent investment decisions. So those are the kind of like the fundamentals I learned from losing my post house. But I was at the same time super passionate about this inbound tech called cloud. If you wind back to 2011, which is when this happened, like Christmas 2011, AWS or Amazon Web Services was very embryonic. It was kind of a startup. I think they had like 60 people in the UK office. It was tiny. It was being used in mainstream enterprise business. It was not being used in our domain. People weren't doing edits in the cloud at that point. Hardly any media companies were storing data in the cloud back in 2011. And I wrote my business plan, which was how do we virtualize the whole media supply chain? So how do we get rid of hard drives and store them in the cloud? How do we move the edit suites to virtual machines in the cloud and just stream them online? How do we do view and review, delivery, AQC, dailies, all the stuff that we've all done for years, but online from anywhere? And went out to try and raise investment. No one wanted to invest because they thought it was completely insane. And in the end, after about
15
2 years,
years.
oh
Sorry, but
man,
you're about 15 years before anybody's using this stuff. Is you
yeah,
know,
it was a bit premature. A couple of years into trying to get investment, I ended up just launching it with my father-in-law, and the rest is history. So that's the backstory to why Base exists and what we do. I'll show you in a moment, but I'll pause because I've been talking a lot. I'll pass back to Joe.
yeah. I mean, I think I suppose through COVID and everyone going remote, it's really kind of we figured out how the cloud workflow works a bit more. We've been kind of forced to, whereas I suppose before you were engineering it before any of that stuff even happened and thinking of it. And I remember I was running a post facility and I got in touch with, I think maybe 2016. We were looking at a new storage server and I came to you and I couldn't get my head around archiving to the cloud and the ongoing repeating cost of it. And I just kind of suppose maybe I just didn't get it at the time, you know?
I don't think you were dissimilar to most of the market. And the issue was no one ever used to budget for things like storage. It would be a one-time cost to buy your NAS, your ISIS, whatever it is you purchase. An archive would just be a stick it on an LTO tape, stick it in a box, don't worry about it again.
Yeah.
There's been a paradigm shift in the way people think about their data, the value of the data, the security of it, how it can be repurposed and monetized, etc. And also the cost has dropped through the floor. You can archive things now for like a couple of pounds a terabyte per month and have it in 3 data centers, whereas 10 years ago it was way more than that. It's like less than halved in price. So it's becoming really compelling. And if you do the total cost of ownership analysis versus building a post house physically versus running in the cloud, it's cheaper in the cloud now. When we
Mm.
launched our business, it was more expensive. So we have reached a tipping point. You mentioned the pandemic. The
Mm.
pandemic was the moment where um, base really lifted off. I'll show you. I'll show you on a screen share just very quickly
Yeah, please do. Yeah,
what we do. Hopefully this will stream okay. Let me know if you can see it in a moment. Is that coming up?
it is indeed. Yeah, it is.
Great. So we're a cloud native media services provider, and effectively we can do the entire content supply chain in the cloud. So in the middle of this diagram is tiered cloud storage and media asset management, which all of our clients use. So hot storage for edit and for transcoding and delivery, warm storage, which is kind of like your nearline for instant access but super low cost, and then deep archive for finished projects and things you want to retain forever for compliance or monetization. But then all the constituent parts around the edge, in my head, are like the same things we used to run at our post house. So we used to have ingest and transcode workstations. Now these are all clusters in the cloud, all fully automated, handling all sorts of camera formats and MES, etc. The virtual workstations are the equivalent of the rooms that me and Joe used to walk into, switch on with a button and do our edits. Now they're virtual machines in the public cloud that are super fast, very powerful. We can spin them up and down by the hour. So they now can be used on a pay-as-you-go basis, tracked with our project spend. We do huge amounts of AI and automation integrations for clients, so they can do things like automated transcription and captioning. We're building automated versioning and distribution for client right now, object recognition, facial recognition, you name it. And a lot of clients are just purely using it for contextual tagging. Like, here's all this stuff in my library. How can I quickly find it and utilize it? And then an example of a custom integration that we have on the platform would be Frame.io, Adobe Frame.io. And the reason I mention it, it's the largest or most heavily used view and review tool in the market. Most of the big studios use it, loads of individuals use it. We've actually baked it in and integrated into our platform. So you can leverage our cloud with Frame.io as your view and review tool, and then you can save a ton of money on archiving your projects when they're finished. And as you go around the wheel and you finish your show, you can then deliver it out to any platform. So one of our gaming clients, for example, push delivers to all sorts of platforms, social, gaming stations, television commercials, etc. One of our brand clients, they push deliver to both TVC, long form documentary, out of home billboards, you name it. And you can literally go through every different type of media delivery and think about the different screen types and endpoints, and they can all be done from the cloud now. So it's taken 10 years, but it genuinely is possible now.
That's fantastic. Presumably, there's a QC built into those delivery processes as well.
Yes, that's something that we deployed about 3 years ago with Dolby. So we can do full automated QC in the cloud. You don't have to do anything on-prem. You click a button, select your profile, send the asset. It goes off to QC. We return back the results, both with metadata and a PDF, and then you can approve the show. This is what narrative entertainment do. You said, could I speak about anyone? I can speak about them because there's a public case study on our website,
Yeah.
which is base-mc.com. But the narrative entertainment case study is cool because that is the old Sony Movies and Sony Kids network that was acquired by Narrative in the pandemic. And in the pandemic, they launched the business, and they launched when everyone was working from home, and they had no choice. They were like, we're not building a building, we want a cloud. So we had 3 months to create their entire end-to-end studio in the cloud. So what happens with them? The movies and the shows come in from their different partners, different movie studios in the States. They get kind of header scanned and pumped into Adobe to be checked, edited, have the trailers created, all the marketing content, etc. They get encoded and mastered and QC'd in the cloud, and then they get push delivered straight to their streaming channel. which is great. So if you look at TV on home and you go to the great movie channel, it's got like Die Hard and all those movies. That's all running from AWS, and
Yeah.
it's like I think it was the first ever end-to-end television company with no on-premise hardware. And that was because honestly, the pandemic came just at the point where they launched. So they had a blank sheet of paper and they did it in a modern architecture.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, so it's maybe take it back down to the user. So is it what's the editor's experience now? Is it say I'm here on an iMac? Is it I use something like Teradici to go into a workstation that's actually in the cloud, or maybe talk us through the kind of user experience of someone working as an editor.
Yeah, sure. There's like three most commonly used architectures. So one is hybrid cloud, whereby some of our clients have still got some on-prem hardware, on-prem machines they want to leverage until they die, but they want to have the burstability of the cloud and scaling of the storage and DR and backup, etc. So in that scenario, we link and sync your data into our cloud service, and we allow you to carry on working locally, but you've got everything securely backed up in the cloud, and you can share it with other people, send stuff for approval, leverage AQC, and all these other things. The second one is bringing the storage to the desktop. So using tools like LucidLink that you may have heard of, we can do our service called Cloud NAS. So you can basically mount cloud storage directly to your Mac or your Windows machine at home or in your office. As long as you've got a decent internet connection, we can stream the blocks directly to your timeline, and you can edit seamlessly or design or comp or whatever you're doing. And you don't have to have a ton of lacy drive sitting around and all these old devices that typically die. And the full-blown 100% cloud option is, to your point about Teradici, it's where you have GPU-enabled machines running in the cloud, and then PC over IP like Teradici or Parsec or RDC that streams the pixels from the workstation back to your machine. So for BBC in the pandemic, we moved all of BBC news team in London to a full Adobe Premiere cloud system over a weekend, just as the pandemic kicked off. And that was using Teradici on our cloud. And what we did for that is we sent 0 clients, which are like little boxes, 300 quid each to each editor. They plugged them into their screen and their keyboard and mouse, and all the horsepower was running from the cloud, and all they had to have was a 0 client and a screen. So that you've got every different configuration you can do, and you can mix and match them depending on the use case. So some people have like designers working on cloud NAS, but offline editors working fully in the cloud, and then colorists working on-prem because they want the benefit of the grade 1 screen and stuff. So you can literally configure it depending on your business use case.
Yeah, and I suppose how does the kind of human side of it fit into in terms of being together and collaborating? Because I think that's one of the challenges that we all had to kind of overcome with the pandemic and everything going remote. And I think it is here to stay because people want it really, or at least want a hybrid model. I think most people. So are there any solutions maybe built in for kind of communication and kind of collaboration?
Yeah, for years we've done over the shoulder, which is like editor can be working, director producer can be looking at exactly what they're doing with a live synced stream on a laptop or another device. We can do remote view and review and commenting, and then link that via panels straight into the timeline. So somebody could be on a train commenting on an edit, and then the person who's working on it at home can immediately access those notes within the timeline and then make the changes. And that's just going to continually get better. But you can't actually replace human interaction. You can't really. So although you can have all this amazing tech, a lot of clients in high-end television and high-end movies still want to have those places where they can come together physically and sit together in a room. But some of our biggest broadcast clients are doing that, but they've got no hardware in the building. So all the actual machines are in the cloud. They've got a massive internet connection or a direct connection to their building, and the rooms are just vessels. They're just empty rooms with screens. And that's the future, I think, is that kind of you have those hubs where you can come together that are completely interchangeable rooms that are just nice seating, nice lighting, screens and keyboards, but all the horsepower is remote. And that means you can work anywhere at any time. You can spin up premises, you can flip locations, you can move to where the tax breaks are, you can
Mm.
access international talent. So that to me is like the perfect long-term vision.
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's almost just the post house of the future is a room with a really good internet connection.
Yeah. And not necessarily like one massive place in an expensive city, but you know, why not have sort of content hubs that pop up everywhere where the costs are lower, where the talent lives. What was really interesting post-pandemic is the talent displacement. So we saw it in tech as well, where a lot of good developers and engineers just all disappeared out of the cities and moved out into much nicer, bigger houses in the countryside with
Yeah.
fast fiber. And I think that happened across creative sector as well. So there is definitely a demand for the ability for creatives to be able to work more flexibly. So if either the production companies or the movie studios or the gaming studios or whoever's actually commissioning the content can provide that flexibility, and I think you referred to it as borderless working in the intro.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of, I think it falls on those people that are hiring and asking for the content to be made to be a bit more flexible these days.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the sponsors. This is Screen Wexford. Beautiful county, great beaches down there. Be a nice place to go and spend a weekend and review edits. If you're a
Yeah,
week,
some fresh
rather
air.
than trudging everybody into the city. And it really, that was, I'm from the West Country in England originally, and that was, you had to move to London when I started out. That was, unless you kind of were lucky getting into kind of BBC Bristol or somewhere. It was off to London you go, and I think that's just changed um, so much. It's really dispersed now. But I think and obviously I'm not at the end that end, but to me that kind of presents from the people kind of coming into the industry. For us it was very, there was still that very kind of traditional almost career with tape library, assistant editor, and off you go. What do you think the current kind of entry points would be with a kind of cloud-based world that we're kind of starting to live and work in?
It's kind of easier, because if you think when you and I started, um, 23 years ago, when I was working all night in my rubbish old Avid room, I was literally having to plug in cables and fix patch systems and configure digibeta decks, and it was all hardware and it was terrifying. And no one showed me how to do it, so you just figure it out on the fly. Um, if you don't have to do that, it means you can really focus on just being excellent with software and excellent at workflow and excellent at creating the content. So it's awesome. If I were 20 again now, first thing I'd do is every Adobe Premiere course available and learn that inside out because Avid's going to die. And I'd also learn DaVinci Resolve because it's fantastic and it's really democratizing grading and finishing, and it's also a really good editor. And I wouldn't be scared of cloud hosting and virtualization. It's just another way to host the material, host the content. And these tools are not greatly expensive to get going on. And a lot of the SaaS platforms, you can either kind of jump on and have a go and learn it and then subscribe to something bigger. The entry point has massively dropped. So if you're really good and you want to learn, it's right there on your doorstep now. The barrier to entry is dissolved, I think.
Yeah, and I think that even that's what you were doing when you were running Sequence. That was, I remember we were grading on color in
Yeah.
there from final, used to be part of the Final Cut suite of apps that they had. And the route to colorist used to be highly technical, um, and a lot of those barriers kind of came down with that kind of easier accessible kind of tech and the apps being available to people.
I've got a dark theory on this, excuse the
Oh,
pun,
good.
but
Oh, go for it.
I'm not saying I have any like intel on it, but I think unfortunately a lot of those parts of the workflow are going to get automated. This is
Mm.
pretty brutal. I was a colorist for years and it was a real passion of mine. But if you think about what you're doing, which is learning how things look and how to configure a look, and then you're doing effectively mathematical color science on an image to then turn it into something, make it look good. That can be trained, machine learned, automated already. The technology is there. So it's a matter of time before generic high volume finishing and distribution of content is going to be automated. You're still going to have like incredibly talented high-end colorists doing the big Bond films and the big dramas and that. But you think of all the tier two, tier three content, which doesn't have multi-million budgets.
Mm.
If you can make it look as good, trained on the learnings of all of these software platforms and all the algorithms over the years, it's going to be quite scary. So how do you embrace that as a new entrant? Probably get your hands on all of these tools as early as you can and become a master of them so you can be the one driving that change rather than ignoring it and then missing out on the jobs.
Mm.
That's kind of the dark side of it, but it's also hugely exciting because you'll be able to create more stuff more quickly, get out to more viewers at lower cost. So that money will have to go elsewhere. So there'll be other jobs that pop up.
Yeah, yeah, and that definitely does feel in sync with kind of the way budgets are at the moment, you know. Um, and I remember going to it. I think you're bang on there because I remember going to a talk at Ramsden about being a colorist, and it was a proper colorist who'd come from Soho. And we remember being very excited. And this was, oh, this is science. This is not as creative as what I thought it would be. You know, the actual doing it at that very high level. You know, and yeah, I can see how a computer would take that over.
Yeah, it will just learn what to do, and so it can be done with code. The other area, sorry, sort of jumped into AI here, but
Yeah,
the other area where AI is already gaining traction, and we're seeing it with our clients, is the boring stuff. So we all love making content and doing the creative part of post, but when you finished your masters, the bit we always used to hate was all the deliveries. So I remember vividly doing like a Warner Brothers Discovery delivery before Warner Brothers acquired them. Um, I was up 24 hours just pumping out different HD Cam SR masters, all the split tracks, all the associated files, all the CD copies of the graphics. Oh my God,
mm,
at huge expense. All of that is going to be automated and it's all going to be file based. It is file based already, but the human part of versioning, localization,
yeah,
pumping out, pushing content to places is already automatable. It's just about embracing the tech.
yeah. And I think you know that part of the process, all a human can really add there is error because they're checking. You know, and that's where the mistakes get made. You get QC fails of, oh, we didn't spot this and this.
Yeah.
So that's a part that I think you know we wouldn't wouldn't mind uh, handing over to AI. You know, especially if that then frees you up to do something more creative.
Yeah. There's the other fun bit of AI, which I think Adobe are really doubling down on, is making our lives easier as editors. Like I was an editor for a long time. It's probably what I should be doing. Like it's my passion, but I haven't edited anything for about a year. And the tools that are now coming out allow you to save tons of time. So, for example, Adobe are developing automated extension of clips. So you know that moment where you've like tried to get the scene just right and you need to get a few more frames on that cut just to make it perfect. That can now be auto filled with generative AI and it looks perfect. Lip sync. You can now do photorealistic lip sync changes and Gen AI developed voices so that you can do language versioning for shows, captioning. All this stuff is going to be automated. It already is, but in terms of mainstream adoption, give it 12 months, man. So
Mm.
it's a great time to impose because if you're really talented at crafting things and putting together a story and you passionately believe in high quality post production, all of these tools are going to just make the boring, time consuming jobs go away.
Mm. Yeah, and free us up, you know, to
Yeah.
add the human touches, I guess, to narrative and bring creativity to stuff. We did have a discussion last night with a couple of editors, and they said, you know, you'd never, you know, you can do that A B, you know, three camera edit, you know, that can be automated, but giving them, you know, AI a bunch of archive to make a documentary, you know, it's never going to be able to bring it together in the same way. And every human obviously would do it differently as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it like a utility. How can it speed things up, make life easier, save money so that money can go more into the creativity. But it is going to have an industry impact. And obviously it made a huge amount of noise, didn't it, with the strikes of people worrying about the impact on
Mm.
the industry and who was going to get ripped off and lose money. But some of this stuff is now so huge and it has such a swell of investment. It's like grown its own legs. It's not going to go away. Um,
Yeah.
and it dwarfs our industry in terms of its size, investment, uptake, way it touches everybody's lives every day. So I genuinely feel like all of us, whether you're in the tech supply chain like we are at base, or if you're a post house or an editor or colorist, whatever it is, you have to dive in and learn these things and start to experiment and understand how they can help you be better at your job. I think we're going to end up in a kind of Argentine augmented working world in media where all the boring stuff will be automated and the really clever, creative, and technical people will be worth a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, post-production paperwork. Like, please
Oh,
automate the lot of it. Yeah.
yeah,
That can
that'd be
go.
nice.
Yeah, that's like what's it, the room 101. That's the AI room 101. Post-production paperwork
Yeah.
is in there. You know, that's really interesting. So I mean, I suppose, you have a really positive outlook there. It doesn't feel like you're not seeing it as a threat to the industry. It may change our roles a little, but you're not seeing it as anything to kind of worry about.
No, I don't. And also, I think there's going to be tools that come out that aren't even on the market yet, which we can't even think of.
Yeah, that's
Um,
what's yeah, it's crazy.
it, there was something I saw a few weeks ago called flawless AI, which you might have seen is blown up in the US movie studio market, and it's incredible. They can take a scene from a movie and take their actors and put them in a completely different place, and then change the timing, and then change the words and the lip sync, and it looks real. And obviously, like processing that stuff is not cheap, but this is stuff that you and I would never have imagined 20 years ago. It would have been months of frame by frame, painstaking visual effects at cost of millions of dollars. And now it's software is doing it in seconds. So there's things we can't yet see that will happen. There's some stuff that we can see now that we've started to play with. So within the next 12 months, we're pretty convinced that we'll be able to get the cost and performance of leveraging cloud storage for non-linear edit suites down to a commodity point where everyone just does it. It's still relatively expensive to do the high performance stuff, but we're looking at tech that's going to allow that to be heavily commoditized and just available on the internet from anywhere. So there's some like not sexy stuff that's happening, which is going to game change cloud post production. And then there's the really exciting, flashy stuff that's all over the news, which will also make a big difference. But yes, it's a super exciting time to be in the market.
Yeah, big time. Like it really feels, I don't know, like traditionally like gaming and TV and film were kind of very separate things, but it feels like those worlds, particularly the last few years, that you can create. I think it was Batman to create a whole great Gotham City walk around. You can storyboard in there. You can create like you can play the movie as a game almost before you make it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that kind of stuff that's the kind of thing of that's the out of the box kind of thinking of like we don't know what it's going to do yet. That kind of stuff.
Do you remember Mike Fisher?
I do indeed. Yeah, great editor.
He's amazing, isn't he? Mikey ended up in creative directing, and he now is a specialist creative director in the gaming world. And he creative directs in-game play trailers. So he's like a virtual DOP, virtual editor. So he lights the games inside the game engine, and he creates the punch-ins and the scenes, and then he edits it all, and he makes it like a super high-end movie trailer, but it's all rendered and created in a gaming engine in software. And this is super, super interesting because the gaming market, look at the size of the gaming market and the trillions of dollars being transacted versus traditional media and post-production. And yet the same talented minds are porting across to that. And like one of our biggest clients is a gaming company in the States, growing and growing and growing. And it's leveraging all the same tooling that's on that diagram, same tooling being used by broadcasters and agencies and brands, but at much bigger scale. So we're also looking a lot at the gaming market and what we can do in that space, and pivoting and adapting some of our tech stack to serve those artists.
Yeah, and that's interesting the way they're kind of almost pushing our industry now, because it's visual, it's storytelling.
Mm.
And if my 10-year-old son was up and could hear this, he'd be so excited. He's obsessed with the Switch, but the fact that there's a future in all of that and that it's not even here yet, and we haven't worked out what it is really exciting.
I think he's asleep, but he's probably playing Roblox.
He's Minecraft, I think it is. I think I've seen a question pop in there. I might see what it is. Question from Yvonne. Do you think AI will cause cuts to budgets or schedules in post-production?
Yeah, because I know for a fact that major media organizations are looking at generative AI and digital transformation at group level. So, because we deal with a lot of really big companies now, boards of companies, like multi-billion pound companies, have teams, steering committees that are figuring out how to leverage AI in their supply chain and what impact it's going to have and what ROI they will get. And if that's happening now in boardrooms that previously didn't even pay attention to technology, it's going to have a massive impact. So yeah, it's a good question and it's worth being mindful of and not ignoring. So it will impact budgets, but maybe it will mean that budgets per production go down, but they're saving so much money across their business they can make more stuff. So it's not all bad news because there's going to be a proliferation of content, and it's going to probably create a whole new bunch of industry strands that we're not even sure about yet. So it's not just going to be brutal and everyone loses their jobs. It's just going to mean that there's higher productivity, higher efficiency, like per asset, per production. That's the way I think most CEOs and CFOs are looking at it.
Do you think we'll ever end up, or there will ever be, just a couple of owners of a completely AI post house where you deliver the rushes to them and they spit out a delivered program at the end? I want an ICV drama. Go.
Yeah, man. So maybe, yeah, probably in post. I'll tell you where it is starting to happen. If any of you guys follow Stephen Bartlett or Diary of a CEO, that fellow from Dragon's Den, very smart chap. He's launched Flight Group and Flight Studio, which is like his new cutting edge agency. And you have a look at their thesis and some of their content online. They are all about leveraging generative AI to create amazing campaigns and images faster, lower costs, experimenting, A/B testing, getting them out there to the market and working with brands. So already in the agency world, some really clever startups are leveraging this tech. Undoubtedly in the versioning and localization space is already happening, because why would you have 700 people transcribing and versioning shows if you can do it using servers? In the post-production domain, to answer your question specifically, yeah, why not? In the next few years, if you had some super talented people, they could create an entire post-production studio in the cloud that taps all of these tools and requires far less overhead, no buildings, and can sort of be leading the charge. And the smart thing about that would be, we know how slow production industry is at uptaking new tech. How long did it take to get people off of tape to file, and then off of like Avid to Adobe, and off of Soho to working from home? They're always 10 years behind, right? So there's time. There's definitely time to think about all these new startup opportunities.
And I suppose off the back of that, looking forward, if you still had secrets, say you were a post house owner now, would you be panicking, or what would you be looking at doing?
I would never do it, because in 2011, it was clear to me that it was already an industry that was a broken business model. And I'll tell you why. All those years ago, the big post houses in the cities were selling offline edit at £150 per day, but their cost of their building, their kit, and their staff was more than that. And they relied on high value, high margin grading, online editing, and Pro Tools and mastering to make all the money at the end of a project to backfill the losses on the first 6 weeks of edit. It's completely broken. So I would never do it. If I was going to have a post house, like a physical post house, I'd find the best creatives, like the absolute best people that are incredible colorists, incredible visual effects, incredible audio mixing, etc. And who are also very technically minded. And I'd create a really small hub for that high margin work, but then I'd blow all of the offline and the processing work into the cloud and just do it pay as you go. It costs something like 25 quid a day to run a virtual offline versus 150 quid a day to go to a room. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, big time. Okay, I suppose as well, like what advice would you give to editors right now as well that all this is going on, and it's been a very slow year. Film has kind of been very quiet this year. I think, the industry is kind of figuring out a lot of this stuff, and workflows are changing and adapting. And that's, we've all had a bit of a slow year because of it. and a lot of people panicking because of that. So, what would you say maybe to kind of like the editors and people on the ground?
Learn Adobe Premiere, and if you fancy it, Resolve. But if nothing else, learn Adobe Premiere, and do not rely on the traditional NLEs that we've all done for years, because they don't have anywhere near the same level of investment or technology advancement going on. And I've got some metrics behind this as well. Like we've got, gosh, thousands and thousands of users on base and over 70 customers around the world. 95% of them use Adobe. And these are the companies that are growing and scaling and doing innovative things. And a lot of people kind of poo-pooed it for a while, and they were like, "Oh, it doesn't do long form and it can't do this. It's rubbish. It just needs to be." Do you remember the conversations we used to have about Final Cut 7
Mm.
versus Film Composer 4 or 5, whatever it was? And everyone thought it would never work, and it worked perfectly. It was a shift, and people didn't like the change. So my advice, just a really basic thing, it's got nothing to do with cloud, is learn Adobe.
Mm. Okay, that's great. I think one of the main things I'd take from this is I'd love to see some of those BMX tapes. They sound awesome.
I've got some. I've got I've got them
It's
digitized into the cloud. I did
huge.
my own archive project a few months ago. Yeah, I've got embarrassing clips of me doing backflips when I was 18, and but I need to keep them so I can show my grandchildren one day.
Yeah,
But
absolutely,
cool.
Ben. Um, it's been great chatting to you, Ben. This has been awesome. I think I could
Too.
keep chatting about this stuff for hours. I know, we had a big list of questions here, and we've gone completely off script just because it was so interesting. We followed the conversation kind of naturally. Is there anything you feel that I've kind of missed along the way here that you'd like
Uh,
to discuss?
I think we hit all the notes that we wanted to cover. Um, no, I mean, I guess just to like wrap it up, I don't want to sound like I'm just bringing loads of bad news, because I'm a natural enthusiast and really passionate and positive. Um, what I would warn against is being too myopic and just concentrating on what you've done for 10 years because it always worked and always made money. That's not going to work for the next 10 years. So embrace all the new tech, learn the tools that maybe you weren't too comfortable with before. Most of the training is free and online anyway, and costs hardly anything to get using, and go for it. So yeah, I think overall it's going to be really cool what happens in the next 10 years. But yeah, don't look backwards, look forwards.
Yeah, awesome. It's a positive, very nice note to finish on. And I think, yeah, we're all really excited to see what happens and see what you do as well, Ben.
Thank you very much, Jaron. Thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, speak to you soon.
Yeah, pleasure, man. Take care. Cheers. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.